Alrighty, let's call this meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call, call roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. For the record, Member Bush will not be present for today's meeting. And all additional members of the Planning and Policy Committee are participating in person. With that being said, Member Sanchez.
Present.
Member Shu.
Here.
Vice Chair Medina.
Here.
Chair Gomez.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum. Do we have any members of the public that wish to address, committee of any items that are not agendized?
Thank you, Chair Gomez. We have two members of the public requesting to address the committee today. Would the members of the public please go ahead and stand up? That would be Cesar Javier and Purita Javier. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee today. Please self-regulate your time.
Please bear with us. We have Asian diction, but we will aspire to read it clearly in English. My wife. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Sharp, Miss Steely, Medical Group, FMH letter, name, Javier. To whom it may concern, my patient, Purita Javier, continues to have significant anxiety in regards to possible health effects related to the air quality around her home. Her neighbors have a ceramic kiln, the use of which may have affected her health, if not physically, then psychologically. She lives in fear in her own home and avoids being outside. Thank you for considering. Miss Purita Javier Barber has been my patient since 2018. Prior to seeing me, she has been a patient of our practice since at least 2005. I am writing this letter on the request of her and her significant other for symptoms secondary to environmental exposure. My patient has been living in her current residence since 1997. Nearby, neighbors have a ceramic kiln. We suspect patient has been having chronic headaches related to this exposure. Headaches are a non-specific symptom that can develop in those sensitive to airborne contaminants. There is no testing for this, however, just symptoms upon exposure. She also has significant anxiety in regards to this concern and has been seen by us in the office and at the emergency department multiple times for respiratory and for cardiac symptoms.
This has been examinations for her, and this is being monitored. On my case, she will read it.
Patient Cesar Javier is a 71-year-old male and is under my care. Patient has been living chronic persistent cough and headaches which can be triggered by environmental changes or exposure to smoke or fumes.
Ms. Javier, I would ask that you conclude your comments at this time.
These are from the Sharp and
Mr.
High
Javier.
Sheriff Permanent. I am taking over.
Oh, thank
for
you.
my 3 minutes.
If I can ask you to state your name for the audio record.
We are Cesar Javier and Purita Javier at 5232 Streamview Drive, San Diego, California. This has reference to the declaration during the Air Commission Board meeting if I am correct, October 12, 2023, stating that the case of nuisance toxicity emitting generating from ceramic kiln is under investigation. And it's located at 5238 Streamview Drive, San Diego, California. We are forgotten by our homeowners association, that is District 9. We made this claim or complaint since June 13, 2021. Why? They left us alone. Why? Because they believe in the investigation of Air Pollution Control District and the code enforcement of the city of San Diego. They believe that nothing is wrong. They believe that it's not toxicity. The police cannot investigate. The hazardous materials cannot do some reading according to them because they were not called by the police. Why? Because the home occupation or business is permitted by the city. We tried to study, we tried to ask, and we found out that there is a link. The weakest link is the City Municipal Code Ruling 11. Another weakest link is the those authorities who approve the application of this owner, who is a graduate of ceramics, no license, not educated, sorry, just ceramics vocational school. There were smoke dams, 1997. I came into the residence 2012, and all these findings or research studies of Princeton and all these ceramics researchers says that it will lead to diseases, COPD, etc. We experienced coughing, sneezing, smoke operated kiln, and then they converted this on June 13, 2021. And we, from the articles, it's really fearful. It's really scary. And these are the indicators that is leading to it. We came here. We are your allies. We are, we depend on your policy. We depend on your intelligence. And it doesn't reconcile because these young children knows what to do with air pollution. These are all here. And I got this here, 62 pieces. I have to haul it home and give it to our neighbors.
Mr. Javier, I would ask that you conclude your comment at this time.
And thank you. I think what the culprit really is, we would like to amend, suggest amend this Rule 11 of the City Municipal Code, which exempts ceramics field. I'm sorry, I exceeded the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any, we're gonna move to the next item, which is the approval of the August 2nd, 2023 statement of proceedings. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair Gomez. I would ask any members of the public that are present today that would like to speak on this item to please come to the speaker table at this time. Seeing no members of the public present wishing to address the committee under agenda item C.
Are there any comments from colleagues of this item? If not, I'll take a motion. With approval.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We shall move to item D, which is the office walkthrough. Yes.
Very good. So just to give you a quick summary, this is a little unusual for us, obviously. But we did have a quorum of membership that was interested in seeing our offices and seeing the lab. And so we did list this on the agenda for Brown Act purposes, so the public is welcome. The public members that have joined us today are welcome to come with us. We anticipate it'll just be a quick walkthrough of the offices and then spending a little bit more time in the lab because that's a lot more interesting than cubicles and desk places. But
Type of a funhouse meeting.
say that again.
Yeah, sounds like a funhouse meeting.
Hopefully not. But anyway, so we'll take a quick walk and then we'll reconvene back in this room. I would anticipate in about half an hour. And then again, if members of the public wish to come along, they can do so.
Members of the planning, the PPC will now, participate in the office walkthrough and lab tour.
Alrighty, we are back from this wonderful tour. Thank you so much. I don't know if there are any members of the public that wish to address the committee related to the tour.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. At this time, I have received no request to address the committee. However, I would ask any members of the public who would like to address the committee on this item and have not already submitted a speaker slip to do so at this time. And please come to the speaker table. It appears that there are no members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item.
Are there any committee members that want to make any comments?
I'd like to thank staff for a great tour. And to David, who's not here for the lab tour. Very informative, and it's good to know all the secret stuff you do.
Now we
Well,
can
that
imagine you in your offices,
There
right?
we go. Well, that was the abbreviated version. Now you've seen it. And we did skip over a couple areas again, more offices and, you know, that sort of thing. But I think you saw the bulk of it. And, you know, we've been here, I think, since 2006. And prior to the pandemic, we were outgrowing this building and looking for additional space. But with teleworking, we don't need to do that. But at some point, we may be looking at, you know, a different office space. Somewhere down the road. To kind of bring us to our next agenda topic.
Well, thank you. So that takes us to the following agenda item, which is D2, long-term strategic planning. I believe we have staff that will do a presentation. Turn it over to you.
Sure, we'll go ahead and pull that up. Just take 1 second. Okay, great. So we wanted to dedicate the bulk of the time for this meeting to the long-term strategic planning process. We've talked to your committee about this on multiple occasions and to the governing board about it on multiple occasions. We've been working on this now for about a year. We started out last year with a consultant and then in the summer last year decided to bring the process in-house. And so you can go to the next slide. Just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about in this workshop, we'll start out with an introduction, just kind of letting you know where we are in the process and where we are in our timeline for development of the long-term plan, and then do some grounding. So we'll talk about what are we doing now? What are the requirements of what we need to do as an agency? And then also talk a little bit about the priorities that your board has previously adopted and told us where we need to focus resources. We'll then wrap that portion up with a very high level budget review. Again, it's going to be a very high level review. We will be going into budget discussions in the next couple of months for the coming fiscal year, but just kind of wanted to give you a sense of that for purposes of this discussion. Then we'll turn it over to Monique and start going through some of the engagement, the public engagement and stakeholder engagement that we've done so far, and talk about the themes that we've heard out of a lot of those discussions. And then address planning and prioritization. That's the time when you all get to give us your input into the development of the plan. And then we wrap up with some next steps. So that's kind of the quick overview. Next, so just wanted to kind of let you know where we are in the process. And so we put in your packet the strategic plan framework and updated it as to where we are right now. This was the framework that was adopted by the governing board back in October. And we've completed that preparation phase. We are wrapping up the continued engagement phase. So the workshop that we're doing today and then the work that we'll do at the governing board at the meeting in March is going to be wrapping up that engagement. Then we will be turning to develop the draft, opening it up for public comment once we do have a draft, and then planning to still bring that back to the board for approval in September of this year. So we can go on to the next slide. So the purpose, obviously, for us doing this exercise and doing this work, you'll hear a lot about a lot of work that staff has done to get us to this point, is to be able to define the direction that we're going to be taking in the next 3 to 5 years. Obviously, the further out that we're projecting, the more 30,000 foot level we're going to be talking about the actions that we may be able to take. But we're going to be building upon our vision, our mission statement, the goals that have been adopted in the last 2 budget cycles, and really documenting the actions that we plan to take to address those goals and that vision. And then also, it's a really important process for us to be able to identify how to allocate our resources and how to best use those resources to get to our priorities. And so, we bring this to you a lot in most of our presentations, our vision, our mission. And we can go on to the next slide. These are the goals and objectives, just as a reminder. This is what we've, the board adopted these when we brought the first budget to the board after AB 423. These were adopted as part of that process. And then we've continued with these each year since. And each year, and we'll do it again in this budget process, we come with new actions to discuss how we're going to get at these goals and objectives every year. And so I know these are all familiar to you, so I won't go through them, but just, again, that's part of the foundation of what is building the plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Domingo.
Thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. So in this next section of the presentation, again, we will provide just a very high-level overview of our main program areas, which you can see on the screen: monitoring and environmental justice, engineering and compliance, incentives, planning, rules, and support services. Next slide, please. But before we go into it, I just wanted to quickly highlight some of the overarching priorities that we are working on as a result of either federal or state mandates or even board directions that we received from you all. And so some of these that you see on the screen are permeated through a number of programs that you will see highlighted in the following slides. Next slide, please. So first, with monitoring and technical services, we are a team of 48 full-time positions. One of the main functions that we do in that division is regional monitoring. We have a regional network of approximately 10 monitoring stations located throughout the county, and those help us monitor for a number of pollutants that we are required by the federal and state agencies that regulate us, and so a lot of those activities are associated with all the different areas of the lab that you can respond and help us track where we are at in terms of attaining different standards of for a number of pollutants region-wide. We also conduct community air monitoring as part of our engagement with the portside and international border communities. We have developed community air monitoring plans for both of those communities, and the monitoring that we do help us track the progress that we want to see in terms of reducing emissions in those communities, as well as inform potential strategies to reduce emissions. We also conduct source testing. We conduct approximately 230 source tests annually, and these are basically to help us verify that the permitted sources that we work with are meeting the requirements and the limits that are set in their particular permits. We also do work with meteorology to help us produce a daily air quality forecast that we publish on our website. And also do something for our engineering division to help assist with health risk assessments and things like that. And then finally, we also have our quality assurance section, which help us look at the data and ensure that all of the data that we are gathering is meeting all of the requirements and the review levels set by EPA. Next, our Office of Environmental Justice. We're a small but mighty, but as I am reminded, also small office of three.
Mighty small.
Oh, so we handle a number of programs. The Community Air Protection Program is the main one. We're, as I mentioned, engaged in the international border community and the portside community, where we work with the community steering committee on both of those communities. And we have developed a community emissions reduction plan for both that we are now currently implementing in partnership with a number of agencies throughout the region. We also work to ensure that our public participation plan, which your board has adopted and approved, is put into practice, trying to engage with more members of the public and more communities that we haven't traditionally engaged with. This past year in particular, we have been cultivating a lot of different relationships with a number of CPOs throughout the region, so we're making good progress on that. We also work on implementing our Office of Environmental Justice framework, which your board also approved. And the main goal of that framework is to help us integrate environmental justice considerations in all of our different areas of operations for the district. So how can we build that lens into everything that we do to make sure that we're serving all communities with that equity lens?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
The flooding, the weather, I see meteorology, does that alter data in any significant way?
Flooding?
The flooding,
recent
yeah.
rain.
The rain.
Oh, like the rains?
Yeah.
It does in a way. With the rain, we see a lot of the pollutants maybe not traveling too much through the air because it brings them down, but it really varies depending on how much rain you get and which areas, how the pollution is in those particular areas, and then also wind has a lot to do with it. So that there's a number of elements that would really influence. The rain is just one of them.
But we didn't lose any monitoring sites or monitoring data.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question.
Did it alter, or does it in general alter the data in any way?
Cleans
No.
the air, so we have better air quality on days when it's raining.
But it's not
So the
in a
flooding this time
significant
around
way in
really
terms of.
Cause a lot of damage to property, and does any of that go into the air?
Oh, I see. We don't necessarily monitor for it in that way,
Okay.
because our monitoring activities, we're basically trying to monitor ambient air. And so we don't really distinguish whether, anything that's coming into the inlets of our instruments is, impacted by, another activity or, it's really hard to say.
And I think some of the concerns might be mold or
Yeah.
asbestos when folks go to renovate their property, but generally when it's wet, that prevents that from being a problem, asbestos. Being a problem.
I would say when it dries, then the dust comes back out
Right, right.
for traffic. So if the mud is not cleared from the streets, then that technically that's what will happen.
But the air quality in the most flooded areas, certainly not only dust, but just the number of trucks that have to go in to haul stuff in and out.
Yeah.
It was a pretty bad couple of weeks, simply because the number of trash trucks that had to go in and out was tremendous, and so for those who were down there trying to clean it up, air quality was not good. Even though it was right after a storm and it was windy, it was not good simply because of the equipment that's used to clean up itself produces so much more pollution.
Well, you know, people store cleaning fluids and paint and all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Paul, a question related to this conversation, you just kind of reminded me, this is off topic, so maybe we can look into it and bring something forward. I know that, the impacted communities are mainly South Crest and, a little bit more east. In terms of permitting, and I know that there are some conversations by the county to waive some permits. Are we looking at that as well? And if so, I would want us to look at that.
Okay.
Just because a lot of the folks that are impacted are low-income communities, unfortunately, but I'm not surprised. So just seeing if there's an opportunity to help them out in such a way.
So we can look into that. The area where I think that could apply to us would be our asbestos notification fees.
That's what I was
So
thinking,
we can take a look
Even
at that and see what
lead.
that impact.
possibly, because there might be some homes that are, unless
We
they're
wouldn't
not,
regulate
no,
for that, no,
Okay.
not directly, and so, the only place it would impact would potentially be our asbestos fees.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And then last, just to conclude on this slide, our EJ partnership, which is a relatively new, or a new program, I should say, for this office, we have partnered with a number of CBOs and different communities throughout the region. We were fortunate to receive a grant from the EPA to expand our presence in those communities by expanding our sensor-based monitoring, air quality education, and identifying air quality priorities for those communities to partner with other agencies as well in addressing those priorities. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mike.
Yes, our colleague, Miney Luther, who's the Deputy Director over Engineering Compliance, is out sick today, so I'm gonna do my best to cover her programs. I'm somewhat qualified, given I started my career many years ago as an inspector, but I will do my best to touch on it. So, you know, those two programs, Domingo talked about monitoring, that's kind of where things start, figuring out where the air quality problems are, and then we move into our engineering group, which, works on permitting. So as you can see here, there's 25 full-time positions in that group. Three main areas of responsibility: permitting, taking in permit applications that come in, reviewing those, make sure they're in compliance with our rules, and issuing permits to those facilities. Those permits include conditions that facilities have to abide by in order to comply with their quality requirements. As you can see here, last year, we issued about 300 permits in 2023. We get more applications than that because there are permit modifications and things of that nature. But that gives you a snapshot of kind of what that volume looks like on an annual basis. One of the other main areas is emissions inventory. And this is an area I think we've talked with the board about some significant growth in response to some recent mandates from the state to really expand this emissions inventory program. So the number of facilities that are required to submit inventories for us to analyze has grown from the low hundreds up to several thousand. Yeah, and so there's a lot of work ongoing there with that team. As you can see here, 1,300 inventories were submitted in 2023 alone. So a lot going on there. And then the third primary area in that group is the hotspots program. We did some work shortly after this board was formed on our Rule 1210 to reduce the risk threshold for air toxics. And so there's been a lot of HRAs and risk reduction plans submitted to the district for various facilities to evaluate what their plans and protocols are to reduce that risk. So those are kind of the three main areas that our engineering team does. Then once those permits are issued, it kind of passes over to the compliance team. As you can see here, 44 positions in that group. These are the folks that go out and verify compliance with the various facilities. Part of the methodology for doing that is providing compliance assistance. So both our inspection staff and we even have a specialized permit or classification for business assistants to provide outreach and assistance to facilities to help them comply. So the education is a big part of it. Then there's the actual inspections. There's, as you can see, almost 15,000 inspections a year. Many of those inspections are done on an annual basis, but sometimes for larger facilities or facilities in certain areas, we'll visit them more frequently, semi-annually or quarterly. Complaints is another big aspect of the program. We pride ourselves on responding quickly to citizen complaints. As you can see here, the average response time is under 5 hours, which is great. We've set up a 24/7 response program, so we have inspectors available, 24/7, 365 to be able to go out and respond to complaints from the public and try to address them as best as we can. And then when we do find issues of non-compliance, there's a process for taking enforcement action and issuing notices of violation to bring those folks back into compliance. And typically there's a penalty associated with that to deter future instances of non-compliance. And that number of around $1 million a year is about average for what we collect in terms of penalties for non-compliance as part of our inspection program. So we'll go on to the next slide, and these are the teams that are under my purview. We saw some of these areas today. I'll start with our incentives program, which is 8 full-time positions. Kind of 3 different areas there. What we call our traditional programs. You may have heard us talk about Carl Moyer program and the Farmer program and the AB 617 Clean Air Protection Program. Those programs collectively run around $25 million per year of funding that we get from the state that's passed through to try to incentivize folks to reduce emissions, switching from older dirty diesel equipment. Used to be a lot more to cleaner diesel. We're trying to get that transition now all the way to zero emission, and so that there's a lot of work going on with that area. We get about 200, a little over 200 tons reduced from the projects that we fund on an annual basis, and that's over the lifetime of a project. So some projects may take 2 or 3 years. Some of the larger projects are 10 years. So over the course of the time of project implementation, each year that group of projects gets about 200 tons of emission reductions. So no small effort there. And then we've got what we're calling kind of our newer programs that are a little more targeted as opposed to being open for various types of equipment. The PAIR program, which you've all heard about, where we've worked with Environmental Health Coalition to get air purifiers and air monitors into the homes of folks. We just wrapped that first phase up with over 500 of those distributed, so we're really proud of that. Clean Cars for All is another new program that we've started, working with a consultant and a contractor to get incentives out for folks in lower income communities to transition from their traditional combustion equipment to zero emission equipment. So got that off the ground. We literally just opened up our e-leaf program within the last couple of weeks. This is our electric lawn and garden equipment program, so we're really excited about that. We're going to have some Spanish language radio advertisements going out over the next couple of weeks, so looking forward to getting more people involved in that program. And then we've got some pilot projects that we're working on, zero emission pilot projects, primarily in the portside communities. Zero emission truck pilot program. We're working on trying to get a similar cargo handling equipment program up and running. So these are sort of the newer programs, often involving work with a contractor to get things moving. And then, kind of looking forward, there's some upcoming opportunities for what we're calling climate action programs. These are areas where, we try to look at what sort of co-benefits we can achieve through some of these programs from the air quality perspective, but they're really geared at greenhouse gas emission reductions. There's a lot of funding coming down from the federal government as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we're working with SANDAG and other partners on, taking the steps needed to position the region for, bringing some of that funding into the county. We will certainly need support from other folks. We don't necessarily have the resources in-house to be able to implement a lot of those programs on our own, but that's why we're working with SANDAG and some of the other folks on those programs. The next group here is our planning and rules group. That's a total of 9 full-time positions. Generally speaking, 4 or so are planning team, and then we've got 5 folks in our rules team. The planning folks in particular also will help support incentives as well as applications come in and things fluctuate from time to time. But the main responsibilities of that group are to put together our attainment plans. So we had to do a new attainment plan for ozone when the state reclassified our region back in 2020. So there was a pretty heavy lift to get that plan together. There's a federal plan that was done in 2020, and the regional plan, or the RACs, you may remember, we brought to the board about this time last year, which is how we're going to comply with the state ozone plan. And then as a result of EPA's recent announcement about PM 2.5 and the reduction of that standard, we're gonna have to be developing a PM plan going forward, something we've never done before. So there's gonna be a lot of work associated with that. The timelines, depending on how things play out, we're planning to probably have to get that done in 2027, but we'll need to start working on that very soon to get through the requirements to get that plan in place. So that's gonna be a heavy lift going forward.
And that change the EPA, is there any additional, look at, well, I know they didn't go on the 24-hour measure, but we certainly know where certain areas the PM is much higher. And so to me, it's kind of disingenuous to do an average of a large region or even a part of our region and give an average that is over, where we know there's huge concentrations in certain parts of our region. And like when I look at the map of 2.5, it's like, this is crazy. So is there a way for us to identify that in the process and then focus in on those where it's really bad?
I suspect, again, we've never done a PM plan before, so this is our first time kind of walking through it. One of the other things they added to that new rule is some updated monitoring requirements, specifically looking at more community monitoring. So I suspect as part of that process, as we get those monitors in place and start learning more about what the localized impacts are, we're going to need to be looking at how we're going to try to address those locally in addition to the regional compliance areas. So
Could a local evolution district sort of looking at the 24-hour count as well?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm looking at Kathy to see if she knows. I'm not
I
sure.
don't know the answer to that either, but we could do some research and
Yeah,
find out.
well, and what I'm driving at is, as we come up with the strategies, other air pollution control districts dealing with other kinds of pollutants have different rules come into play when the 24-hour count or projection is bad. So if that becomes one of the strategies, then we need to start looking at shorter time periods and not 1 month averages. But if we know what it is going to be, but we do that for smoke and fires, right? You don't allow burning because we think that it's
We forecast that.
we forecast that everything's wrong, so you don't allow people to burn. Or should we allow people to drive in a neighborhood when we know the air pollution is tremendously bad? And the way they do that, right, if you get to a certain level on ozone, they have plans to try to reduce driving.
Yeah, part of what the process is going to entail is really looking at our existing regulations, seeing where there's room to tighten those standards to help get us into attainment. I think both on a regional level and a localized level, but looking at it from that 24-hour perspective in addition to the annual perspective is something that we'll need to figure out what that might look like.
Can I ask a question? The time that we weren't driving as much because of COVID, did you have like monitoring where you can see the numbers go down and now you're seeing an escalation of that data? Where there's more areas, more activity, more pollutants in the air?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, there is a public questioning, so we'll put a pin on to your question and then let staff and then committee, but we'll get back to you. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try to get through this quickly. CEQA is another area that we're working on augmenting and enhancing our CEQA program. We've been much more active as part of this, our new structure as a commenting agency, looking at projects in other regions and other areas locally and providing our feedback and suggestions on, how they might account for air quality and other issues. And then we are looking at formalizing our processes when we're a lead or a responsible agency. We're not a lead agency very often because most of the time those things are handled by the land use agency where the project is taking place. But there are times where we are a lead agency, and so we're really looking at how we can strengthen that process and kind of formalize that going forward. So that's going to be another big focus of us going down the road. On the rule side, there's what I'll call kind of our traditional rule process. As part of the RACs we brought to the board last year, we identified 21 measures that we've got to analyze for feasibility. primarily focused on ozone at that time, but, going forward, we're gonna need to start looking at PM, as I mentioned, a few minutes ago.
That's our regional air quality strategy. Just as a reminder.
RAC stands for, yes, thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
Alphabet soup up there.
Yeah.
So, just that effort alone with the 5 staff we have is a big lift on its own. So there's a lot of work going forward in the rules group. And then oftentimes we'll get requests from EPA that says, hey, you need to make an adjustment to this rule in order for it to meet federal requirements, or we've changed the federal requirement. And so that sometimes could throw a monkey wrench into our plans for the rules we want to develop. And then there's additional rule activity associated with AB 423, AB 617. You're familiar with the indirect source rule process that we're working on. That's been a pretty big heavy lift so far. This team is also taking the lead on working with the port on putting together an MOU. And then there are a handful of other measures identified in the SERP that we're going to be looking at in terms of rule implementation. And then last but not least, we've got our support services group, 26 full-time folks. Those are the folks that, those are the folks that support, the operations throughout the district. We've got our budget, fiscal, and accounting team, doing a lot of work with budget development, the monitoring of that budget. We've got, as part of our separation from the county, we used to get a lot of support from the county on things like that when it comes to budget, auditing. We no longer have that support, and so we've had to bring a lot of that in-house. There's been a lot of additional resources needed to make sure that we're complying with those things. And then just general accounting, payment processing. You see here, I'll touch on it in a minute, we get, thousands of renewals each year. Those are all transactions that, our accounting staff has to process and payments that we make. So there's a lot of work on the budget and fiscal and accounting side. Cost recovery is another area where we spent a lot of time over the last several years. Again, the board is very familiar with that. We've done 4. As of next month, we'll have our 4th fee revision potentially in a 3-year time frame, all as a result of the state auditor's recommendation to get us up to full cost recovery or maximum cost recovery on our fee programs. So that's been a heavy lift going forward. There's time studies associated with that we're going to start doing more on an annual basis to make sure that we've got the right numbers in place. And then looking at opportunities for new revenue sources. I mentioned the emissions inventory program and how that's growing. We touched on it at our last meeting and looking at a possible fee to help offset those costs. And so we're going to continue to look at opportunities like that where we may be able to recoup some additional funding to offset costs for various services we provide. General administrative support. As I mentioned, we've got over 8,000 permits that we issue each year. And so each one of those has to be renewed on an annual basis. So we've got a team of folks that help support with that. We do get about 1,000 Public Record Act requests annually, and so that's also a decent amount of work. And as you saw walking through our facility, it's a nice facility, but it's an aging facility, and so there's a decent amount of work associated with keeping the lights on and the heat on and the plumbing working and all those sorts of things. So we've got staff members to help us support that as well as our fleet that you see out there in the cage. And then last but not least, information technology. We've got some in-house staff to help support our IT program. That's another area where we still do receive support from the county, but since we're no longer part of the county, we're a little bit separated there. One of the big efforts there is information transparency and trying to make sure we've got that data available for the public to see. If you recall at our board meeting last month, we have that new mapping tool that shows complaint information. And so we're really working hard on trying to get that information publicly available to folks, and our IT team really helps with that. We've got some system upgrades coming in the near future for our primary permitting system. So there's going to be a lot of work and costs associated with getting that new system in place and up and running. And then just the general support and maintenance associated with hardware and getting systems functioning properly. So we'll go on to the next slide, and I'll very quickly kind of run through the budget. I'm going to go to the next one, Mia. Just at a high level, this is this year's current fiscal year's budget, 23-24. This is the operating budget. So this is the kind of, the day-to-day breakdown of the different programs. You kind of see here how it's broken down. This is the expense side of the house. So, admin services, about 30% of our budget, compliance 18%, engineering 5%. So those two pieces of the pie, compliance and engineering, make up the bulk of the funding that we collect from our fees, try to offset those costs. Monitoring and source testing is another big area, and then the mobile incentives, planning, and rule development folks. And so this I would expect the budget that we're gonna present to you in a couple of months for next fiscal year, probably to look somewhat similar to this. I mean, there's gonna be a little bit of increase in cost, but generally speaking, our operating budget will probably remain, right around that $40 million mark. Next slide, please. This is what we call our special revenue funds. This is mainly those incentive dollars that I mentioned, the pass-through funding that we get from the state. The two biggest chunks of that are the community air protection grant, as well as those region-wide incentives like Carl Moyer and those things. And, just because we have $77 million budgeted, doesn't mean that that's how much money we get from the state each year. A lot of that is projects in various stages of completion. And so if we've got a contract out to pay someone $1 million for a new piece of equipment, we've got to budget that money, even though it's not new money coming in. And then the smaller piece of the pie here is our Air Quality Improvement Trust Fund, which is the DMV funding that we get. So each year we budget around $12 million out of that fund to help. Some of it goes to incentive programs, some of it goes to our mobile source group, but a lot of it goes to help kind of offset costs in other areas that we don't have revenue for, primarily our monitoring group. And then the last slide on budget, so those are kind of expenses, how the money gets spent. The last slide, if you go to the next one, Mia, thank you. This is our operating budget in terms of revenue sources, right? So the first kind of blue pie there on the right is our fees and penalties. So that's primarily the fees that we collect as part of our Rule 40 operations through permits and things of that nature. And then the amount that we collect in penalties each year. Those fee dollars are limited to how they can be used to just offset the costs associated with those programs. So inspections and engineering and source testing. Grants make up another 25% or so of our revenue. These are different than the pass-through grants that I mentioned earlier. These are kind of operational grants that we get from EPA and CARB to fund some of our operations. I'll skip the next one for now. DMV, there's that $12 million that I mentioned. That's again, DMV revenue that we get in each year. And again, there's some flexibility and discretion theoretically how that can be used, but given the fact that we don't have a ton of other revenue sources to offset some of our costs, we don't have a whole lot of flexibility in how those dollars are used. They're primarily budgeted now for covering our monitoring costs and then a bit of our mobile source incentives support. To a lessening extent, because of our fee work, we're using less and less of that revenue on stationary source costs. And then the little piece of the pie there, the light blue is our use of fund balance. That's like our savings account, essentially. That's really the area where as we sell the fee revenue, we're going to be able to offset that and really shrink that piece of the pie. So we're drawing less from our savings account to fund our ongoing day-to-day operations and really using that fund balance for what it's intended for, like one-time operations or one-time projects, things of that nature. So as we get closer to full cost recovery, my hope is that that piece of the pie will shrink and allow us to use those dollars in other areas. So again, super high level coverage of this year's budget, but kind of a primer for the discussions we're going to have over the course of the next several weeks. So with that, I think I will pass it over to Norman.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I wanted to start off with. So. All right, next slide, please. So all that Paula, Mike, and Domingo shared is really providing the grounding for us to think about, okay, we've got all these things in the works, right? We've got this much budget. When we're starting to look at the strategic plan themes that are emerging from the community, there are some things in which that have emerged from the community and all the stakeholders we engaged so far that are very much in some way being completed by the team here. But there's also some new things as well that we're seeing in the themes as well. That was the intention of the grounding, just kind of get that big picture snapshot. Because after I give this short presentation, highlighting both what engagements took place and the key themes, there's going to be an opportunity for you all to help start prioritizing based upon your expertise, based upon what you're hearing from the community as well, start prioritizing out of the 50+ themes that we've heard, which ones are the greatest priority that we should probably be doing within years 2 to 5, right, of the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So since October, we've done over a dozen strategic planning outreach sessions with different stakeholders. We've also have done planning sessions with APCD employees. So I'm going to break it down for you what we've done so far. With board members, we provided opportunities for one-on-one interviews. Also, some folks also provided written feedback as well. The general public, there was 2 virtual workshops, and we also had an opportunity for online feedback on our website. We also engaged partnering government agencies through surveys and also one-on-one interviews. With industry, we had one industry-specific workshop during the Air Industry Working Group meeting, and also engaged in a number of smaller conversations, small group conversations. With APCD staff, we had 4 staff workshops, opportunity for online feedback, and then also one-on-one interviews. What you see behind me here is some of what staff shared in those 4 workshops we conducted here. So I encourage you, when we get moving around, to take a look at what some of the things staff has shared here. Next slide, please. We also really wanted to engage environmental justice communities in this process. So we've had 7 meetings so far in environmental justice communities, 5 virtual, 2 in person. Specifically, we would not have been able to do this without our community-based organization partners throughout the region, where we actually went to meetings in other spaces where community members were already comfortable, were already meeting on a monthly basis, and we plugged into those existing meetings, and they were gracious with sharing that time with us. And so you can see the communities in which we've engaged, residents who are from these various communities, from all the way from Oceanside all the way down to southeastern San Diego, and also going out east towards El Cajon as well. With that as well, one of the meetings we focused on East County health professionals, which was really informative. The meetings were in English, Spanish, and Arabic. And then also we engaged staff at 8 or 7 community-based organizations who also help inform some of these key themes as well. Right here in the gray, we actually last night we did a strategic planning workshop with the International Border Community Steering Committee. And then next week we'll actually be doing a strategic planning workshop with the Workside Steering Committee. So they'll kind of wrap up our community engagement portion of this. So what you're going to be seeing in the themes as it relates to EJ communities and excuse me, and CBOs won't necessarily include the themes that we heard last night and this particular group. So we imagine that these themes will also evolve as we do our last workshop. Next slide. So what are the themes? I know this is a bit small, so we had printed for you all a handout here. So whatever's on the screen is on this handout here. I'm not going to go through every single one in detail. I'll highlight a little bit of each one and then probably go a little bit in more in depth for ones that maybe merit a little bit more description. But as I'm going through it, if there's a theme that's sticking out to you, I want you to circle it or highlight it, because that's going to be important for you to do so that we can, when we get to our planning and prioritization component of this workshop, it's going to be a seamless transition to get to that spot if you're already kind of thinking, hey, this one really stands out to me. So highlight that, circle it as we're going through it. So the way we divided the themes that emerged is we've divided them by the themes that emerged per stakeholder group that we engaged. So some of the things that you're going to see might be redundant, because, for example, one of the things that we heard almost across the board, whatever the stakeholder group, was more monitoring to take place. So you might hear some things that, excuse me, might reemerge for each stakeholder group. So for the APCD board, right, we heard themes around environment, the importance of environmental justice and collaborative initiatives, emissions reduction, air quality enhancement, agency effectiveness and community impact, industry engagement and perception management. Number 5 there, strategic expansion and collaboration. So this really about focusing on strategic growth, forging partnerships with regional entities, and enhancing collaborations for emission reduction, but also being a region, a binational region with that binational focus as well. Number 6, challenges and opportunities in air quality management. So really acknowledging, right, the challenges of managing air quality, including the regulatory complexities and also the political dynamics being important. Equitable access to clean air and quality of life. So really centering that clean air is a universal right. Number 8, APCD's role in environmental justice and public health. So recognizing APCD's role in addressing EJ concerns, strategies for emission reductions and community involvement, stakeholder engagement, relationship building, and board operations. So how are we fostering relationships with a wide variety of stakeholders as well? Next slide, please. In terms of staff, by and large, staff shared that they're really proud to do the work that they do here at APCD because of the impact and the mission-driven culture. Staff would like to see support and maintenance of a diverse and inclusive team. Also looking for opportunities to modernize the facilities and the equipment that we're using as well, to bring this more in alignment with like technological advancements, and even sustainability, organizational independence. So are there different processes, policies, actions that can be done more in-house rather than reliance upon the county, community outreach and engagement. So making sure that APCD is a household name. Operational efficiencies, are there automated systems out there that can make us more efficient? Is there a way that we could centralize documents a bit better? Employee training and resources, greater transparency and communication across the organization in terms of how decisions are being made, and then budget and resources. So making sure that there's an increase of budget for resources and hiring of new staff to improve services and efficiencies in order to successfully implement agency requirements, but also advance APCD goals and priorities as well. Next slide. So themes that we heard from the EJ communities we've engaged so far and the communities organizations as well is folks really want to build a relationship with APCD. APCD in the past hasn't necessarily been an agency in which many folks that we've engaged with have engaged with in previous times. Second is be an ally. So there's opportunities for APCD to do that in terms of there may be land use or transportation decisions that are being made in other spaces. How can APCD share air quality data so that folks are able to do the advocacy work in those other spaces, or how can APCD provide a letter of support to the community and so forth. Sharing of information and resources. There's a lot of questions that are asked when we're out in the field that may not be necessarily something within APC's jurisdiction, but how can we be a trusted resource to share and connect people to those other resources as well. Direct community incentives, looking for opportunities to expand incentive programs that community members are the direct beneficiaries of. So is it like weatherization projects? Is it the clean cars? Is it the PAIR program expansion? Expanding air filters program, so expanding the PAIR program to other communities. Develop and update rules. Again, increasing community monitoring and data access. That's centering around like increasing the amount of monitors we have in the community. Partnering with sovereign tribal nations. And so what does that government to government relationship look like beyond CEQA as well? integrate environmental justice framework into, that it doesn't just live in the Office of Environmental Justice, but it's integrated into kind of daily operations. And then lastly here, connect communities via media. How are we more intentionally using various media outlets to make APCD a household name? Next slide. Themes from the general public, again, around public education, about, you know, the connection between air pollution and health. Looking at indoor air quality, that's not necessarily a space that APCD has really done a lot of work in, but people are really interested in that. Promoting cleaner technologies, and also in the households as well. Grants and incentives, so offering more funding for programs to have residents transition from electric to cleaner technologies in their home, or transition to electric and clean technologies. Issue of wood burning has come up. Again, increasing monitoring is kind of that thing we're seeing across the board. And then permits and applications, so streamlining those processes as well. And public engagement is a theme that we're seeing across the board as well. So from industry, what were some of the themes that emerged as part of those conversations? You know, this one we heard in multiple places around streamlining operations and services, increasing public engagement, cross-jurisdictional coordination, staff development, so making sure there's ongoing professional growth for staff members, expand the monitoring network, and continue collaborative relationships. So with industry stakeholders. So by and large, industry stakeholders we engaged felt that there's a good working relationship. So to continue that type of collaboration. Recognize progress to date and challenges ahead. Really folks wanting to have some acknowledgement of kind of the progress that has been made, is being made, and ways to kind of mark that progress. And from our government agency partners, what have we heard? They really want APC to be more actively involved in regional conversations, to solicit feedback on proposed initiatives, leverage state and federal funding opportunities. So what are the opportunities to partner with other government agencies to leverage funding, elevate public awareness on air quality, coordination on shared objectives. So how are we coordinating with other, agencies, this one specifically around the county itself, to leverage those resources and relationships, and prioritization of short and long-term challenges. With this one, APCD may not necessarily have the resources needed to fully meet the demands. So how are we planning for that in the long term? Develop strategies for issues outside the normal purview of APCD. So things like the Tijuana River Valley, right? Cross-border pollution. How are we working with, with those agencies that have that direct authority to address these particular concerns as well? Next slide. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a pause here and open it up for public comment. And then after that, we'll come back, and there's going to be a number of ways we'd love to hear from you all to start planning and prioritizing some of these things we talked about today.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and open it up for public. So if there's any members of the public that wish to address the committee, I welcome that now.
At this time, Chair Gomez, we have received no requests to address the committee. However, I would ask any members of the public that would like to address the committee that have not submitted a speaker slip, you may do so at this time and go ahead and address the committee.
Okay. My name is Connie from Gunther, and I have a comment regarding the time that we had COVID. There's less transportation and activities going on and everything kind of slowed down. Do you have like baseline data to show what that looked like for air quality versus how it's now escalating since everybody's going kind of back to normal a little bit?
I can address that question. We don't specifically have that linked to transportation because when we do monitoring, all the levels of pollution that we get are, from a number of sources, right? So it would be really hard to say, that any reduction in emissions was related specifically to transportation. However, we did see some reductions, particularly in black carbon, which is a pollutant that we monitor for in the portside community. And we can make an assumption that was linked to a reduced level of activity due to the pandemic, but we don't have a study on that particular issue.
Okay, all right, yeah, thank you, that's my question.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would ask you to go ahead and fill out one of those speaker slips. Yes. Thank you.
But there are people that do have that data, both Caltrans and Sandag have that data, so. In terms of vehicle miles traveled and truck data as well, so. But you're right in that our education levels have pretty much come back to pre-COVID levels. Transit use, of course, has not come back to pre-COVID levels, but it's coming up close.
Any other members of the public? No? All right, before I turn it back, I'm gonna ask committee members if there's any questions related to the big overview. If not, I'll go ahead and turn it back to staff.
I have a question. I was interested in, who or what were the public agencies that you interviewed had to provide comments?
I can speak to that a little bit. When we had our consultant on board, they did a handful of one-on-one interactions with public agencies like the port, city of San Diego, the county. We participate on a Sandag committee as well, Sustainable Communities Working Group Committee. And so what we did with that group was put out a poll to the members and asking for responses from our community partners. So that would be all 18 cities, North County Transit District, MTS, Airport Authority, the port. And so that was the primary mechanism of feedback that we got from the government agencies. The biggest takeaway from me for that was we didn't get a ton of response, right? And I think that speaks to one of the themes that we saw there is increasing that outreach, increasing that engagement, getting more involved with, our jurisdictional partners so that they can learn more about what we do, we can learn more about what they do and where we intersect.
And just to follow up, what were the positions of the people that responded? What agencies or what departments? Are we talking about elected officials? Are we talking about?
It was primarily staff. So the main group was that Sustainable Communities Working Group. And so it's generally, management or executive staff from the various cities and transit agencies and those folks.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think the findings so far, the information is great, and the outreach has been great, working with all these different entities from the EJ community to public agencies. And so my fear is we could probably do all these things and do them great, but I don't know if we'll get to where we want to go to, partly because unlike the CERT, we don't have a specific goal to do something in a particular place by a particular time. And I want to put that out there to the community. We may not have the methodologies, but to me, that doesn't matter so much as, do we really want healthier air? And to what degree, by what time? And that's one thing that needs to be asked. And if the community commits to that, then we can come up with strategies on how to do that, what it might cost, and maybe at some point they'll say, maybe we don't want to do it that fast or something. The other is, of course, the EJ communities have identified this, but I don't know if the rest of the region has identified where should we start, where should we do the most part of concentration? And I think there's some presumption that we want to do the most affected communities first. That's where we should be. If we're going to pilot something, maybe that's where we should try it out first because they need it the most. So that's a broader strategy or theme or principle value that we need to ask. And if the community, if the if the elected officials or if the EJ community believe in that, let's jump on that theme and that value or principle. Because my real concern is that we need to get someplace by a particular time, otherwise we'll turn around 5 years from now and say, we did all this, we must have succeeded. But no, if the same percentage of children are going to hospitals or same number are going to hospitals for asthma, the disparity between healthy and unhealthy is still the same. The disparity between some communities, rich and poor, are still the same. That doesn't work. So I'm reminded a piece of data that the California Transportation Committee heard recently, that overall pollution has gone down. That's really good. But the disparity between poor and rich is still there. To me, that's not addressing our equity thing. And I hear that often, that, hey, things are getting better. And my question was, better for whom? And if we still have that disparity, I don't know if we've done our job very well. And that's why I brought up the issue with diesel, with 2.5 particulate matter, that we set up some goals, and if we can work that into the strategy. These are, to me, broader strategy ideas. We have a lot of methodology and individual things, but we need that kind of principle, a strategy to move forward. Are we going to take care of the people who need help the most first? Are we going to concentrate on them in some way? The CERT does that, the poor side community, that gives us some of that. But there are other communities that are in bad shape as well, and we certainly need to stick to those goals. The interim goals for 2026, that's 3 years from now. And I don't know if we're doing anything to reach that right now. With our partners, with the MOU, with the port, we can do that. Sandag has a regional plan coming up. And this is something that's in the resolution for Sandag to do. And I think APCD can be right there and says, here's some numbers, you need to reach that in your plan, that you're drawing up the plan now. Right now, I could tell you the draft plan for the next regional plan, regional transportation plan, does not include any of this. It really does not include it, even though we passed resolution change with it. So someone needs to play that role.
All right, Mr. Shu, you're getting into the weeds. You're getting into the
Thank you.
strategic plans. It's good, but let's,
More detail do we need, but.
yeah, Mr. Medina, a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like Monique mentioned, a lot of people, a lot of the different stakeholders talk about monitoring. And you gave us a review of your monitoring program that has several programs that come into it. My question is, how do all these different monitoring programs interface with each other? And which is the most significant in terms of data that then can be used to identify trends and even short-term current air quality? You have modeling, you have regional sensors, you got local sensors, and now there's also sensor technologies in the community, but you know, which one is the one that's given us the most bang for our buck?
I think there's a number of goals and requirements that each of those different programs are trying to meet. So I would say that they're all covering, you know, giving us our bang for our buck in that specific area. Where I see an opportunity, going back to your you know, thoughts about, you know, environmental justice communities, is an expansion of our sensor based network, because that will give us a quicker, more cost-effective way of reaching more communities in a faster way, and also getting more information and establishing baselines as to, you know, what do things look, how does the air quality look like in terms of you know, a number of pollutants of concern in those particular communities that we're right now not monitoring. And so I feel that that would be an area of opportunity that we have actually heard from a number of stakeholders a lot of interest in, that would get to some of the concerns that you're highlighting. But in terms of our existing programs, they're all trying to cover a specific requirement. Sometimes, when we're looking at a regional network, for example, all of those pieces of equipment and all of those programs are helping us track, criteria pollutants, and they're, meeting a number of EPA requirements, et cetera. So, yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity with sensor-based.
I just have overall, and then I'll turn it back to staff. Overall comment, although I appreciate kind of like the breakdowns of the different sectors. It also, it feels like there could be an opportunity to, because there's some similar comments, right? So kind of like right now in my head, I'm seeing like, it seems like a lot, but maybe if it can be put into, this is what we're hearing, not so much from the sector or the sector, that's information that you have, right? But not the public or the board. I think you can tell us these are the different categories in terms of sharing the themes that came through that, but also, this is more like as it moves forward, maybe also connected to the goals and the objectives, to figure how is this all linking, right? If there's an area that obviously still a goal or an objective, or nobody's talking about it, should it be a goal or an objective, right? That should be a conversation that the full board should have a discussion around. I don't know where we stand on that, but it's just overall.
Yeah, I think you're reading our slides ahead, but that's definitely one of the next step that we certainly wanna take. Awesome, thanks for that. So in terms of what we'd like to do, next slide. And you've already started this process with the comments that you've already provided. Is to walk through 3 different exercises and then opportunities to engage in further discussion. Where you all have an opportunity to start prioritizing some of these things here, right? So next slide. So in terms of prioritizing, you'll each have a sheet of stickers just to kind of go through and see, okay, which of the themes that have emerged, and that's why I was asking you to like circle the ones, just go ahead and put it through, and then we'll start to identify visually which are those priorities that are emerging. Like I said, like with monitoring, if I see that hit a number of times, that'll rise certainly to the top. So that'll be the first thing, and then after you do that, we'll engage in a discussion. The top, 3 to 5, time allowing, just to hear more from you all. Why did you choose that as kind of your top priorities as well? A couple things. If there's a priority of yours or a priority that you see up there, a theme that you see up there that you feel very strongly about, you can put multiple stickers on that to elevate that. If there's something if there's a principle or a theme that you're not seeing up there, we could use the whiteboard space here. So I heard you share, focus on the most impacted communities first, right? Eliminate or close the gap between the disparities between EJ communities and the general public. So those are maybe 2 things that we might want to add to this as additional priorities. So next slide, please. Oh, actually, can we go back up one? And I'll come back to this as well. Then you'll also have an opportunity in this process, after we kind of do the prioritization exercise, to think critically about resource routes, right? What are the different what are the different opportunities that we currently have or we need to pursue in order to ensure that we can successfully move forward those priorities that you've all identified as well. So we'll do that with some cards, and when we get to that point, I'll share how we'll do that. And then lastly, there'll be opportunities for you all to share some ideas of how the board can play a role in supporting some of these priorities as well. And we'll do that with the yellow cards. Next slide. So all the elements that have been shared at the previous workshops, including your involvement on the board, what should APCD's top 10 priorities be? we'll talk about, I'm giving you more than 10 dots, that's okay. And if so, add more to the list. So I'm gonna pass these out and, break the barrier that I put so that people wouldn't step there. And then if you can go around the room and feel free to get up and identify those things. And then that'll just give us a quick visual of kind of where you're thinking, where those priorities should be.
Are we the only ones that are gonna play?
Yeah, right now, yes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you all about 5 to 10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But look at all we got.
You can, like I said,
You can put,
you
you
can put
can
them,
write
you
your
can
own
put multiple in
priorities
the thing.
all on one.
Good. More dots from it. Big five.
We have to come today when we can try not to.
Yeah, I feel okay, it's just this cough that will go away.
Just so you know, I'm putting it below.
Pardon me?
I'm putting it below.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That's okay, we don't.
We used to do. Yes. Maybe just one framework. And then what we can do.
Oh, it's really quiet. We can like talk.
I feel like we need some music, you know?
The Jeopardy music.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir, thank you. Thank you.
The monitor.
And Jay. And then be fine.
We are given opportunities to study and learn. This is all about human beings. It's not the terrain, it's not the vegetation, it's the human beings.
Yeah.
And we start from education, from the kid up to this level of our ages. I'm sorry, ma'am, I am coming in on the, but that's the urgency of this. Human survivability, in the hope that we will live longer than the last.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Everything else. And there is one lacking here. People from the hospitals that will give you feedback, how many deaths from toxicity, how many deaths from, and the military. Because they are the ones also guarding everything, protecting.
Thank
The
you,
citizens.
Mr. Puckett. We're gonna have another public comment period shortly.
Sorry, folks. That's what I mean. I am just trying to be excited by this information.
So interesting. So. I'll put that in the comment. We have another.
How are folks dealing with time?
And we wanted to have a.
Good?
Good time before the board.
I went to the rest variables to help. And so Mia, in real time, I was highlighting on the presentation the themes that emerged the most, so you might want to refresh it so that the new slides come up.
Get some. We have. Buckets of them. Pass it out to your friends. We usually the interpreters on the video notes.
Yeah.
I've seen you on my video, and I was trying to place, you're like. And then, it's virtually. Okay. And thank you for being here. Oh, sure. You're back.
We're just waiting.
Yeah. I'll put these three.
Get them all.
Just to confirm, I think that would be beginning psychotic. Personally, that would be beginning psychotic.
That's like okay, if folks are ready to come back. So I did my best in real time to highlight which ones kind of rose to the top for each of the kind of stakeholder groups. But again, even just in my first read kind of look at it,
there's also a lot of overlap on those themes, as well. In terms of APCD board priorities, there's three major themes that rose to the top. One is around, emission reduction and air quality enhancement. The second around strategic expansion and collaboration. And then the third around equitable access to clean air and quality of life. I'd love to hear from you all, those who put those three as kind of your highest priorities for at least that particular stakeholder group. What was the inclination to like prioritize that? What were the reasons behind that those three emerged for folks who put their stickers there?
Those were 2, 5, and 7?
Yeah, 2, 5, and 7 emerged, yeah.
So for me, it was more of, impacting air quality. So that was kind of like the driver of really trying to figure out how do we actually do reduce air quality.
Yeah. Actual emission reduction. Yeah.
I mean, there's key words there like hotspots, border region, communities of concern, and binatural perspectives. I mean, those, if I just saw those words, they become a priority for me. And then the word equity, you know, if I was just to the words that pop out.
Absolutely.
I thought the numbers 2 and 9 were basically the same.
Yeah.
So anything in number 9, you can add to number 2. But I particularly like number 7. Partly because of what Jack was saying earlier, that disparity of where you live is, you know, has real health consequences. But also because there are structural issues of where you live. Like if you live next to a freeway, it matters little what we do. I mean, it doesn't matter little, but we can control industry, but industry and right next to the freeway, you're still gonna have that exposure. So we have to have a balance between.
Yeah, and maybe that's where number 5 comes in terms of strategic collaboration, right? With other agencies like CARB or others that regulate and impact, right? Those other sources.
No.
Yeah. All right, next slide. So what rose to the top for this particular group, facilitation and equipment, or facilities and equipment, community engagement and outreach, employee training and resources, and budget and resources. So this is from staff, but for those who prioritize this, what were the main reasons? What were the main things that stood out for you that had you want to elevate these particular elements here?
To me, facilities and equipment is very important. You gotta be top of the line so that you can get good data and your people have the right tools to work.
Yeah.
And then I goes to the training of it. In order for staff to reach the highest level that they want to reach and have advancement in their profession, they need to have the resources and the equipment needs to be there for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically those were the same reasons.
Did you add to this one or?
I did, but you know, the tour was very informative, you know,
Yeah.
because then when you actually see the equipment or you hear that the equipment is a bit old and not so good.
Yeah.
Those are the instruments that we use to at least have some hard data when we deal with these communities. And it's not, yeah, I think having data on the air quality, and not always know that is important. What keeps on back of my mind, which is a side issue, is that we're not using the data on the health, from the health department, from the emergency room. And I know there are, of course, problems using that data because of the quality in healthcare. But it's important to have this data because it is hard evidence, and having that available is I think very important.
Yeah, So really hearing like ensuring that, you know, that the resources, the training, the equipment, that they're on point, that's really a foundation for a lot of the kind of the work, the quality of work, right, moving forward as well. Anything else folks like to share about the things that came up? This one? Okay, let's go to the next one.
I do have one I
Yeah.
want to share. The fact that the other ones were not highlighted doesn't mean that they're less important. Right.
Right, exactly.
And I really give kudos to staff for putting those, all of those things.
No, absolutely. And we certainly, as we work towards developing the draft, want to certainly incorporate as many of these as possible. It's just kind of getting like just kind of a temperature check from you all in terms of what you all think should be moving first and foremost. Let's go to the EJ community slide. There we go. Yeah, right there. So these two rows to the top, there, actually there might be a little bit more, but we'll focus on these. One is around direct community incentives, and then the second was around connecting with communities via media. I'd love to hear from you all why those two rows to the top for you all. And also it's number 5 rows to the top as well, which was expand the air filters program.
It's kind of, 4 and 5 are kind of similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think those are providing direct assistance to those communities, right? So, and incentives, yeah, actually, I like incentives as well as the other side, the stick side. But the carrot side is certainly, like important, and, these communities have suffered for many, many years, for decades. We should at least be able to provide some, funding to try to ease, the pollution they have suffered. So when we deal with a simple thing like e-bikes.
Right.
That, you know, it has many benefits.
Yeah.
And it's not expensive, thing, so I think that's important. And if we want to go on to, connect with the community via media, we really need to do a lot more. And I think, it's always tough, to deal with that, but, you know, hopefully we can deal with the tools that are made available with us with social media and others. So to bring that, that need up.
Yeah, anyone else?
You know, it's funny, mine were not those.
Yeah, that's okay. Which ones did you choose?
For the community. I chose number 1.
Uh-huh,
And I also chose, I did choose 10, you know,
yeah,
but I wasn't gonna put anything on 5, but I eventually put 1 because the community wants that. I personally don't think that that is the answer. I've said it here several times. People having little air filters inside their home, they need to clean the air outside. And there's also a lot of things that are happening inside that have nothing to do with the outside anyway. So, but people really like those air filters. And so, I'm reluctantly, because that's what people want. But the increased monitoring is the other one I put in, you know, that's another.
yeah. Anyone else?
I did, I did select 4 and 5 as well. More for the same reason you mentioned, just in terms of really trying to figure out how do you, as we're working to reduce air pollution outside, which I think that's a big task. What can we do at the micro level? Right? To me, that's the micro level, really. So we shouldn't ignore that. And hopefully that can lead to changing individual patterns too, right? And creating awareness of our individual impacts.
Yeah.
So there could be more to it. So I think aside from, to me, it's a couple of things. One is, those are the reasons, But having said those reasons, I think there's an educational component to it as well, right? Not just here's a device or here's something,
Right.
which is not reflected there. But, that should be part of it. And then I also picked, which one was it? Probably. I don't remember. Maybe, number 9, integrated environmental justice framework. Yeah. Yeah, to me, that is really important. Everything that is done within the organization, how is EJ reflected? And I know there's more intentional work happening around that. So that to me is really important. Yeah.
Well, if I can make a quick comment on both filters and number 4. A lot of that is usually thrown out there as mitigation. And I have a mantra about mitigation. Mitigation is bad. You mitigate because you're doing something else that's bad. So we gotta fix, as Enrique mentioned, what else is doing bad, so you don't have to mitigate. So the quick fix is to throw in some mitigation, right, to give you a foot filter. But it's much better if we didn't need that filter, because the rest of the county is not having to use filters, right? The other places are not having to use this kind of stuff. So I think that's, so as we push for these kinds of things, we should know that this is not the preferred answer. This is just something we have to do in the meantime so that people are less sick.
All right, let's go to the next slide. So here, general public education, air quality, clean technology, and monitoring rose to the top. What were some of the reasons why those rose to the top for you all?
For me, the indoor quality is a really important one, because I feel that it's not enough, it's not tested enough, and I think we spend more time indoors than outdoors at times, just related to our styles, so I'm interested to explore that more. Clean technology to me is just a way to reduce, I think they showed that. And then monitoring too, I think to me, it's like, it just doing increased monitoring is really important to figure out, okay, how are we doing and where are the areas, the hotspot areas that we need to focus and.
Anyone else on this one?
I also picked 3. And also number 1, public education. I also picked number 5, wood burning, because we have heard from community members about that inside the independent. And that does affect the outdoor quality. And so I didn't realize until I saw the statistics from APCD how common that is. And so I thought it was just a few people, bonfires on the beach, but it's a lot more. So it does make an impact. And that's why I put that in. And monitoring also, the process, is interested in why the public chose number 7 or listed number 7, because that's not something they're really involved in generally. Mr. Javier is interested in that and what we can do to improve permits, but more in the process of revising the rules. But I was curious why the public was interested in permits and applications. So anyway.
If I had to guess, I would say that came in through like our website, for example. So it could have been an industry representative, but the way that it came into us was reflected as part of the general public outreach.
Okay.
And I believe also, it may have come through in the public forum that we had the online.
Yeah, all right.
You have it in the industry.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide as well. In industry, so it's the same one, right, that we were just talking about, as well. Are there any more comments on this particular item here for folks?
I actually did select that one. And it was more because it makes sense, like if we can be more efficient.
Mhm.
And I don't look at it as let's loosen the permitting, but it's more, how can we make it faster? Because in my head, in the business, if they don't have the permits or it takes several months, I don't know what that looks like. That's like timing, they're not working, they're not operating, right?
Right.
So I just feel like, yeah, it makes sense, like how can we be more efficient from that lens?
No,
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a really good clarification, right?
Right.
Not lessening, but actually how to do better.
Well, I think there's a balance there too, in that as we look at adding some more of these controls or adding more to the process about how do we focus on certain communities or CEQA or things like that, it naturally lengthens that process, right? So it's incumbent upon us to try to figure out how to incorporate those additional requirements and desires while still streamlining the process as much as possible.
No.
Well, that page has the fewest number of blue dots, just a slight observation.
That's probably all mine.
All right, let's go to the
Let
next.
me add a few.
Oh, you want to add? Okay, sure.
Yeah, I did pick number 1, but I also picked 3 and 5,
Okay.
monitoring network. But in general, I was actually, I thought it was pretty enlightened comment by industry in general. And I really liked number 6, that they recognize that staff is accessible and work collaboratively. So I didn't see a point in putting a dot there since they already agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's good,
To continue that culture of sorts.
yes.
Okay, I'll modify what I'm doing. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. Government agencies around leveraging state and federal funding opportunities, elevate public awareness on air quality, and then prioritize resources for short and long-term challenges, and then develop strategies for issues outside of normal purview. Why did these rise to the top for you all? And again, we're seeing some echoes, right? Elevate public awareness on air quality issues that we've seen in other slides as well. Yeah,
I picked 4 and 7, so
let's talk about 7 a little bit.
that.
Why 7?
First of all, I kind of think that it's good that other government agencies are recognizing that APCD has a role in informing them of the ramifications
Yeah.
of some of their
Actions.
action decisions, land use planning, whatever, that they may not consider the air quality impacts as well as we would. And so that's how I interpreted that.
Yeah.
And also the fact that they recognize the financial nature. And so that's why I also picked number 1. Like that, if they're asking for greater participation from APCD to provide insights, that's exactly what we
Yeah.
want APCD to do.
Right. Yeah, any other comments on this slide here?
Just kind of mimicking or repeating what Enrique talked about, number 7. Yeah, we need to think. Certainly, we don't want to go to what, I shouldn't say it that way, but I think we need to do better than what we've done in the past. And that means thinking outside the box and working these issues. And certainly if we look at something like cross-border issues, we should realize that air pollution doesn't stop at the border. It goes both ways. And we know the border itself is causing air pollution because of the current border policies.
So I've been jotting down kind of like 6 big buckets that I heard from what you've all shared, from what you've prioritized. So I heard in terms of ensuring that there's, measurable emission reduction being like a big theme that's come out of the conversation. 1, making sure that there's those foundational resources, right, in terms of making sure staff has, the training, but also that the equipment is on par. I also heard about the importance of prioritizing elements for immediate community relief, whether that is in terms of the incentive program or air filters. I also heard a big emphasis on community education, outreach, engagement, that being a major one as well. I also heard monitoring rise to the top as well, in terms of what you all picked. And then lastly, the last big bucket that I heard about as well with this last slide in particular, it's about the importance of cross-agency collaboration, but also, excuse me, expanding kind of APCD's involvement on other issues that do impact APCD's ultimate mission, right? And goals as well. So those are kind of 6 high-level kind of buckets that I heard as you all prioritize those key themes as well. Did I miss a bucket? Would there be another big bucket?
I would, I think maybe the last one, but I think more enforcement is really important.
Enforcement, yeah.
All right, that's the stick, right?
Yep.
Particularly we have to prioritize, I would say, more enforcement in the hotspot communities, the communities of concern.
Yeah.
Just because to me, that's where it should start.
Along with that, enforcement is, and there's a broader principle.
Yeah.
But if someone has to pay for something, it should be coming from the polluters. And sometimes we don't do that. We want everyone to pay for it. Well, maybe we can reduce pollution if the polluters have to pay for the pollution.
Yeah.
And that's a basic principle that we sometimes don't utilize as a way to address these issues.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the important thing. You know, if I'm going to use more water, I'm going to pay for more water. But if you give me a flat rate, I'll use all the water, you know, I'm not worried about.
Mhm. All right, let's transition to slide 29, if we could. And I'm going to modify the next 2 activities and just make them more discussion based for the purposes of time. So I know that we kind of have a little bit of a hard stop around 6:10, 6:15-ish. So slide, yeah, there we go. So for the, yeah, there you go. So for the priorities identified, are there existing resources and staff available to advance the priority? If not, where could APCD seek those resources, or what strategies could be pursued? So thinking back about the grounding presentation, right? Where things are currently resourced, what are the commitments that have already been made as well? Keeping that in mind, let's go to the next slide. We could just engage in a discussion here. So what I was going to have you all do is connect the resource routes to the top 10 priorities, like actually physically, but we'll just engage in a discussion. Love to hear from you all. Here are some potential resource routes, right? We know that if we want to advance these priorities successfully, we're going to have to think about, well, how are we going to be able to advance them? There are things that certainly could be advanced through existing resources, but there are some things that we might need to phase, right? There are things that we might need to update fees, or for the mobile source enforcement program, maybe seek money in part to implement that particular program. Apply for additional grants. I think in the budget, it's like currently 9% of the budget. Do we do more around that? Mind you, we don't have a grant writer on staff, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Advocate for legislative actions to increase funding, redistribution of current budget, reprioritize staff time. The idea around a per capita fee at the city level, right? Which may require state legislation, and there could be some other creative approaches. But I'd love to hear from you all. Maybe we could switch up the question a bit. Are any of these particular like resource routes that I'm calling them, are there any particular ones that you feel most strongly about that we should be thinking about and looking at as we're trying to you know, as we move towards the draft strategic plan, that we should start be thinking about to apply to some of these priorities that you identified. Are there any as well that you're like, nah, that's maybe a conversation for another day, don't feel very comfortable with us kind of applying those types of things to some of the priorities that have been identified today?
I would say seeking CARP. I'm curious to see the CARP funding that we currently have. Is there more that we can get, or like, I'm just wondering if that is what that looks like. I know what we're getting, obviously, you went through it, but is there an ability to be more aggressive to bring more resources there?
Yeah.
We put it up there because we have that MOU with CARB that we've talked with you about, and we have a mobile source team of inspectors, and we're really proud of that. We're the only district in the state to do that. But we're funding that with DMV dollars. And I think it's about 2 million.
Right around that, yeah.
$2 million that we use for that program to implement CARB's program, with the regulations, right? So could we approach CARB? Certainly there's a lot right now in the state budget news that is not good, but is that something that we could try to address over time? You know, that was one thing that we thought we could highlight.
And just more broadly, you know, the direct revenue that we get from CARB for our operations, it's a lot. You know, we get a small amount of money through AB 617. You know, we've lobbied for more money to help, you know, as we brought on additional programs, but it's not enough to even cover those costs. We get very small amounts of funding, you know, for general operations like monitoring and things like that. Even the funding that we get for those pass-through grants, there's a portion that we get to cover our administrative costs. It's usually not enough to even cover our administrative costs. So, you know, that's a real challenge is, you know, these state and federal agencies and the mandates that we're required to implement, you know, because of their direction, doesn't come with the funding that's needed to fully do that, so.
Well, thanks for that. I do think that they're being more proactive there can maybe lead to something more specific. And I think I've said it before, I think the fact that we're by the border, I think we're missing an opportunity to be a little bit more organized there should be border dedicated resources, both at the state and at the federal level. So I just feel like there's a conversation to be had there. What that could look like, I mean, there could be, the state is facing a deficit, but there's money there, right? It's about priorities. And we all know whomever's the loudest, that's what gets funded. So how are we using our delegation? Are we organizing that? Are we influencing them to really introduce something at the state level, at the federal level? Federal, I don't hold my breath there, but I think at least at the state level, right? We should be a little bit more proactive there. Way that I see it. I don't know, I think you mentioned in the presentation, I think, you were the one that mentioned it, in relation to what led to this new board function, right? I don't think it came with a lot of resources, right?
Zero.
So I think there's always an opportunity to revisit the bills, right? So maybe there is an opportunity to do an update. And there could be an ask, and I don't even know if there was no, there wasn't any resources tied to that bill. So there could be, perhaps now that we're in it, a couple of years into it, this is where there could be some amendments there.
Yeah, realizing what the impact of the costs associated with that transition were,
So I think, and that's a conversation that has been already established, right? So we can go back and revisit that possibly. That's an opportunity.
Anything that's off the table?
The general principle, that transportation planners know is pricing, is what really works to change behavior. So if we really want a change behavior, you need some kind of pricing tool. So whether we're looking at how we're gonna implement, the programs in CERT or reporting, Port Authority work, the maritime plans. We have to think of pricing as a potential tool, which no one likes to talk about because people don't like to pay. There's, and you know, we think of incentive programs instead of what, well, because the reverse of incentive is the pricing tool. Right, so I think that's what we should, keep broadly in mind. And the other is bringing in something that, we just covered at Sandag, or is being covered, is, land value pricing or land value capture. So let's see if there's some way we can do that with, the additional commerce and income that is being brought to our region, because of all the, well, actually, for that matter, what the pollution is creating is actually additional wealth in our region. We should be able to capture some of that wealth. So all these are things that I think they're general principle things, but they've become a pricing structure. And lastly, as I remember, Dr. Akila Weber just had a session on the social determinants of ill health. If she puts something forward, we should tag it. Maybe some funding, to help APCD or other agencies that could help them. And my thought is she's probably gonna put a lot of that towards health, with county health department. It should be there too.
I'm gonna skip the next two prompts to.
Yeah, we are gonna have
I
to,
think member Medina has some
Oh, yeah,
comments,
sorry.
so, no, take
Okay.
them and then close this off and go to the public.
Yeah.
Okay, the question is, how much are we advocating or lobbying the legislature? Is that
So-
something that we're doing?
yes, the short answer to that is we're starting to do more of that. We've brought, we're now very close to hiring a management fellow that's gonna be working on our legislative program, and Melina, our public information officer, is also working on legislative affairs. So we do have bills that we're supporting that would address, for example, this some of the funding gaps that Mike mentioned in the incentives programs. And then I'm also working on language, and I've provided it to South Coast, but it's not for this legislative session, but for next one, to potentially propose a DMV fee increase.
Right.
We've talked about that before. The board will be back at the board talking about that more, but that's action that would need to happen at the state level. And I think given the new PM 2.5 standard, given the contribution of motor vehicles to these issues, I think it's a reasonable way to move forward. And so more conversations to come on that.
Well, the only one I want to add is, in terms of creative approaches, is all the 18 cities in the county benefit from the APCD, and they can pony up some funds.
Mhm. So there is language in the health and safety code that would allow for a per capita fee. We need to run through council what would be an allowable mechanism to make that happen.
Okay.
So that's why we say that there may need to be state legislation to make that workable.
Right. And hire a fundraiser.
Grant writer, yeah, raise for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Hire more staff. Okay, so with that, do we have any public comment on the title?
Thank you, Chair Gomez. We have one request to speak on this item. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Please self-regulate your time. I will ask you to conclude your comments when your time has ended. Our first speaker is Connie Rascon Gunther.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Please state your name.
Connie Vascon Gunther. I wanted to comment regarding the cross-border and the regulations affecting businesses on both sides. Several years ago, as part of, I worked for aerospace company, Goodrich, it's now Raytheon Collins Aerospace, and built a 350,000 square foot maquiladora, right, probably 5 miles from Calexico's border there. And during that time in building it, we had to adhere to all the OSHA, all the regulations, EPA. They told us all the designs of that building had to meet the air quality, all those restrictions, because the air goes into the US and it doesn't just stay in Mexico. So with that, just wanted to bring that up, that maybe that's something, I don't know if that was just incidental to our maquiladora because it's such a large footprint, but it maybe should be something that as we're starting to reshore and these businesses are kind of coming into the zones that we build that partnership, cross-border partnership where you do have more of an influence and probably fees associated with that to make sure that they're being compliant not only to the Mexico regulations and laws, but also on the US ones. Sorry.
Yes, we have just received one more request to speak, and I will now call Mr. Cesar Javier. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Please self-regulate your time and state your name before speaking.
I am humble and grateful because I could just imagine I am in a university. Trying to defend my, dissertation, survivability. If this is only my own language, I tell you, I am a poetic guy. Air pollution control district is the guardian of our air we are breathing. And this is a national security. This is one of the elements of our survivability. I have heard and I learned from all these inputs. They're great. And it is only meant for you, for us as humans. Not only the terrain, the shell, but our society. We miss education here. Where are the PhDs from UCSD? From the state university? Where are they? They are the rich source of all this. And we are talking about science as the first tool or equipment or our weapon. They are a rich source of this. What we are, I could just sense that we are just monitoring. And the word pacing there is very clear. If there is the budget, we only do this. As we gather more bullets, second phase, I think that's the strategic one. Because we always need money. We always need resources. We cannot. Let us live within our means and take it step by step. If we need to hit the border first and clean up the air there, let's do it. But first, come to our poor communities. Where the aging people, where the kids. That should be the priority, but we cannot do it across the board. Let's see the terrain. Let's not just take it as a flat surface, no sir. I tell you, our homeowners association has abandoned us. Look at other homeowners association, they're very strict. Hey, you cannot do that, I'm sorry. No permit, mom, no permit, sir. Land use, selling agency. We will not provide you permit. We are poor in our community, just to tell you again. They are trying to destroy these green new roots, the source of our lungs in our humble community. They are trying to divide us politically.
Sir, if you could please wrap it up.
I'm sorry, I am not complaining, but this is survivability. Let's have a sample on the first page. If we would like to attack Logan community, let's do it there. Let's go there. Even 3 houses or 3, what do you call it? An industrial activity that is misplaced in a certain area, phase by phase.
Thank
And that's you see as the top notch there. Thank you. Pardon me for excesses.
Okay, anything else from staff?
Just a
Sorry for.
quick, very quick, if you want to just go to the very last slide, we will be bringing some very short version of this to the full board in March, so there'll be another opportunity for obtaining feedback. Then, then we'll start in the process of the drafting phase, and then we'll be back with your committee. I'm certain at some point prior to bringing the draft forward to the full board in September. So much more to come on this. Thank you so much. We appreciate
Yeah, I appreciate it.
you hanging in the time.
No, thank you
dedicated to
for
this.
the heavy lifts.
And if you have other thoughts in the meantime, please send them our way. We're happy to, including members of the public, if you have other thoughts of what we talked about tonight.
All
Please
right,
send them our way.
so with that, we are going to adjourn. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to state for the record that member Sanchez is the proceedings at 4:59 p.m. And the final, the next meeting of the Policy and Planning Committee will be held on April 11th at 9:30.
Only one.